Welcome to the Planning for Life podcast with certified financial planner professional Russell Jacobs and financial life advisor Carl Coolidge. Carl and Russell will share creative strategies and ideas for overcoming challenges in your personal and financial life. Inevitably, life happens, and we will empower you to reach your destination. Thanks for joining us. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to today's podcast. Carl Coolidge. I'll be interviewing a good friend of mine, Jason Tate, who's a local attorney with the law firm of Roberts Tate. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, what I wanted to do today, Jason, is really just talk a little bit about your story and how you started in this field, kind of going back, really your professional career and beyond, and sort of why you decided to go to law school and sort of your trek.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in North Carolina. I born in Roxborough, but I primarily grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. And as you know, Carl, you're a basketball fan like I am. I grew up a huge Duke fan. So when it came time to go to college, going to University of North Carolina was not an option. My dad's family was actually originally from Georgia. They grew up in Elberton, and he was kind of pushing me to look at the University of Georgia. And, I was looking for another big state school.
Right.
I was looking at a couple small schools, middle-sized schools, big schools, and University of Georgia was kind of the big state school since I wasn't going to UNC. And we came down one, beautiful spring day. I remember coming down with my parents and going to Athens and visiting Athens. And for those of those of you who are listening who have ever been to Athens, it's an amazing town. Beautiful day, college kids out running, having a good time, and fell in love. It was just a great place. So I ended up coming down and going to school and staying, and here I am 20 years later living in St. Simons.
Fantastic. So you went to Georgia, you loved it, and then tell me about your track to go on to law school. What made you enjoy the law? Did you have some family member? What was your reasoning behind that?
No, it's kind of a combination of things. Growing up as a kid, my parents would always joke, you have young boys like I do, they can be stubborn and hard-headed and argumentative. And my parents would always joke that I should be a lawyer when I grew up. And, that was kind of the beginning of it. I always had an interest in history. I really focused on that in high school, and then college. I graduated with actually a history degree. And when you graduate with a history degree, you really have basically two options: go to law school or become a high school history professor or a teacher. So, that's kind of something that was always interesting to me, and really from a young age, something that I was kind of always looking at. In hindsight, honestly, now history, while interesting, is not the most practical of degrees to have. I think if I had to do it over again and had the knowledge that I have now with the experience that I have, I'd probably major in something a little bit more practical, like business or finance, especially considering, now that I practice law, my primary focus is representing businesses and companies and dealing with business-related legal issues, which, legal issues, while they are unique and novel to the law, also overlap with, the nature of the business. And understanding the business is what allows me to be a better attorney for my clients.
Right. So you went to law school. Why did you decide to stay at Georgia? For the same reasons you went undergrad there, or I'm sure you had other opportunities and maybe, hey, you'll go back to North Carolina, or what?
No, that's actually an interesting story or question. When I came to school at Georgia, I really never had any intentions of staying in Georgia, or at least, I didn't have any real plans, but I kind of always assumed I would go back to North Carolina. That's where my family was, and at least my friends growing up were. When it got time to look at law school, I was looking at Georgia because, I was there. And Georgia is a great law school. I was looking at Duke, again, in part because it's a great law school and in part because of my affinity for the school and growing up a huge Duke fan. Looking at some other schools, Wake Forest, a great school, Georgetown, a great school.
Right.
And I actually went and when I was trying to decide, I went and had lunch with an older friend of mine who had just graduated from law school and was practicing with a big firm in Atlanta. And his advice to me, which is probably turned out to be some of the best advice I got was basically, if you're going to stay in Georgia, then go to Georgia Law School.
Okay.
If you're going to end up practicing in Atlanta or anywhere in Georgia, then, the connections that you make in school are going to benefit you more than trying to go to even a better rated school out of state and trying to come back. And then also, honestly, we talked a lot about the finances of it. I received a scholarship to go to law school at the University of Georgia, so my tuition at least was covered, which was important. Absolutely. And then when you factor that in with, looking at schools like a Duke or a Wake Forest or a Georgetown, which are all phenomenal schools, but the cost of attendance is, $40,000-$50,000 a year. And you think about getting out and being saddled with that debt, trying to start a career.
Right.
It's a little bit overwhelming. And one of the things I wanted to do, I was very blessed that my parents helped me with undergrad, pay for school. They did everything within their power to make sure that my undergrad was paid for. But when I went to graduate school, that was something I wanted to do on my own. I didn't want to ask them to incur the additional financial burden of putting me through an additional 3 years of school. So, when I was looking at making that decision and factoring in the potential cost and the potential debt that I was going to have to incur in order to go somewhere else, it just kind of made sense to stay in Georgia.
Right. It's nice not to have a house payment your first day out of school.
Yeah. I tell the story. One of my best friends growing up, who went to UNC undergrad, went to Duke Law School, but we were, part of the reason I was looking at going back is we were going to team up. I mean, we've been best friends since we were 4 years old, and we were going to, room together and go to Duke together, and that's where he ended up going to school. And, he did his 3 years at Duke. I did my 3 years at Georgia. We both graduated at the top of our class and both ended up in Atlanta, actually living together in Atlanta when we were, still young and single right out of school. And we basically had the same job at different firms, but basically same level, first, second year associate with big firms in the Atlanta area. And the only real difference between the two was, by the time he graduated from Duke, he had about $180,000 in debt, and I was debt free.
Right.
So that's, again, nothing against it. It's an amazing school. A lot of those places are. It's just, factoring in cost benefit, which is interesting now because it's one of the, hot topic political issues that you're currently seeing is how the government should deal with Pell Grants and funding and student loans. And, there's actually been somewhat of a shift in the conversation about college now, whether the benefits outweigh the cost when the cost has continued to increase. And I know from your standpoint, that's something that you're constantly talking to your clients about, is not just saving in retirement, but being able to pay for their kids' college education. And I know from some of the projections I've seen, it's kind of a scary number.
Yeah, and again, we don't want to pay for it in the ways that have been in the media lately either. So that's probably another thing.
Right.
So you graduate from Georgia, which good background on that. So give me a little bit of your job progression. What your track was after you graduated from law school.
Well, while I was in law school, I originally went thinking I wanted to be a transactional attorney, whether that meant real estate or corporate transactions, mergers and acquisitions. For whatever reason, that was just something that interested me. And frankly, the thought of standing up and having to give oral argument as a litigator was frightening.
Okay.
As I progressed through law school, it was something that started to interest me a little bit more, although kind of the uncertainty, unknowing fear of getting up in front of people you don't know and making arguments and being asked questions on the spot was still a little bit frightening. So my third year of law school, I actually basically took the minimum number of classes, and I volunteered at the local district attorney's office as a prosecutor. And under Georgia has what's called the Third Year Practice Act, which allows third-year law students to actually be sworn in and try cases under the supervision of an existing bar member before they actually pass the bar, which passing the bar is actually, what allows you to become an attorney. Right. So I did that my third year and probably tried 7 or 8 cases, felony cases on behalf of the district attorney's office in Athens, and really just fell in love with trial and being in court. And so that kind of set my sights on becoming a litigator. I graduated from Georgia and took a job with a small litigation boutique in Atlanta that was known more for trying cases in order to try to get more courtroom experience. did that for a few years, and kind of during that period was really looking at trying to get hired on as a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice. And so I kind of was trying to get some experience. I was volunteering for the local DA's office in Atlanta, trying to get some experience as a prosecutor to potentially get hired on as a assistant United States attorney, which are jobs that are fairly hard to come by and generally kind of high profile. And so luckily I finally got hired on as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Georgia in Savannah, which was coincidental and great because by that time I'd met my now wife, who is from St. Simons, and she was more interested at the time. She was living in D.C., but seemed more interested in moving back home to St. Simons than she did to Atlanta. And we were kind of trying to figure out the logistics of that, and me getting appointed in Savannah was kind of perfect because it was closer to her home, not Atlanta where she wanted to go. So that was it. Once I got appointed and I got my clearance from the Department of Justice, we moved to Savannah, and I was a federal prosecutor for a few years. And then about the time we started thinking about having kids, we wanted to be closer to home and family. So we moved down here. And again, I went to go work for the largest firm in town at the time, a transactional litigation firm.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you wanted, when you got the federal prosecutor job, you just decided after a few years that it had run its course?
Yeah, that's generally the path that the Department of Justice has kind of taken. It used to be, and there still are instances in which people come on and they're career prosecutors.
Right.
But more and more what the Department of Justice has tried to do is market themselves to young, intelligent candidates, lawyers that are looking to get some experience. And it's kind of the trade-off. They get perhaps the better candidates, the best and the brightest, but they only get them for a period of time and kind of recycle them. And so, yeah, when I went in, I wasn't sure if it would be a career or if it would be a temporary thing. It was something I enjoyed doing. It was something that was a passion of mine. It was something that
great experience.
I would do it again if, given the opportunity. But, just kind of like we were talking about earlier, as you get older and you're talking about, having a family and starting a family and supporting a family, eventually, the idea of private practice, going back to private practice made sense. And then plus being closer to home, and my wife's family lives here, having them to help with the kids was obviously a big factor. Being somewhere where you have that support is really important.
So you worked for a large law firm here for a number of years, and then you decided to venture out on your own. So why did you make that call? What was your thought behind that?
Really just a desire to kind of do my own thing, to build something that's mine. The firm that I was at was a great firm, but they obviously had named partners, and that, those names were never going to change. That was something that they had built. Doing what I do in particular as kind of a business lawyer. Business, that includes business consulting. And what I mean by that is, not just litigating when my clients have actual, disputes, but also advising them with respect to regulatory issues and legal issues to try to avoid those disputes. Really, if my clients end up in court, that's kind of the last resort. That's what we're trying to spend a lot of our time avoiding that to the best of our ability. So being a kind of a business lawyer, I kind of had this desire to build my own business and create my own company, if you will.
So you had that entrepreneurial spirit that you wanted to do your own thing. So I guess I would pivot is to say, why do you do what you do? I mean, what keeps you focused? What drives you to do this? I know you quite well. I know you're obviously a big family man, and, your family comes first, and, really just want to understand, why do you do what you do every day?
I
know that's a tough question.
No, there's a lot of layers to that. Obviously, I joke sometimes with my partner and some of the other lawyers that I work with, that, we provide a service, but, in all honesty, we're not changing the world. I mean, we provide a service to clients, and we try to do the best job that we can. But at the end of the day, this is a job, and it's something that I am passionate about, but I do try to keep, while not always successfully, try to keep my priorities in line and focus on, what's most important to me, which is my faith and my family, and, in particular, my kids. And, we spend a great deal of time with, sports and baseball and dance and a lot of other things. And, one of the benefits to living in a town that we live in, a smaller town, is that we have, I feel like, a lot more freedom and ability to do those things. We can, when we left and started our firm, almost 10 years ago, we decided to open up an office on the island close to home so that we could be at I'm a mile from the kids' house, I'm a mile from the kids' school, being able to go and see them throughout the day or them come see me. I mean, that's obviously the main reason I do it, is to provide for my family and try to give them opportunities that my parents, just like my parents did for me, try to make their opportunities better than mine were. From a business standpoint, intellectually it's a challenging job. It's one of the things I love the most about being a business attorney is that while a lot of the legal issues may be the same, a lot of the issues that are presented to me vary greatly depending on the nature of the business, whether I'm dealing with a huge Fortune 500 corporation that has, a tax issue, or whether I'm dealing with a, small financial planning firm that has a regulatory issue, or whether I'm dealing with a boat manufacturer that has a warranty issue. So the legal issues across the board are similar, but kind of going back to the point I made earlier is about knowing about the business is, each business has unique challenges. Each business has unique issues that are more driven not by the law, but are more driven by the nature of the business. So, whenever I get a new client, one of the things that I always tell them I want to do is, I want to come out, I want to see your office, I want to see your shop, I want to see what you do, I want to see how you do it.
Right.
I want to be able to visualize what y'all do to the best of my ability, so that I can try to identify issues, legal issues that I think could affect you, whether that be employment issues or regulatory issues or permitting issues. All of these things, again, are similar, but they vary with respect to each business. So each time a new client comes in, I kind of have to do a Cliff Notes version of their business and learn as much as I can about it in a limited context to try to provide the best advice that I can.
Right. Well, I think that explains, part of your why is that you obviously want to fully understand your client and really help them in the best way that you can, certainly. So what, this is a two-part question. So there's young attorneys out there that are going to listen to our podcast, of course, because everybody listens to our podcast. And, what would be the biggest piece of advice, or if you could give them some background as to what you think they ought to do for not only young attorneys, lawyers, but also I would say young entrepreneurs, because that's what I view you as first and foremost, is you're a small business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you just happen to be an attorney on top of that. So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, the big thing, the interesting thing about what I do is, and again, this is my background, may limit me a little bit, being a history major versus a business major.
Right.
But when you go to law school, they teach you how to be a lawyer. They teach you how to think critically, which is probably the most important tool that they teach you in law school. They don't necessarily teach you the law. I mean, you obviously learn that as part of the process, but what they really teach you to do is how to issue spot, how to analyze issues critically, and then how to go do the research in order to find the answer. Mm-hmm. One of the things they don't teach you in law school is kind of, to your point, that entrepreneurial spirit of, how to run a business, how to run a law firm. And that's not something that I had a ton of experience with, given my background in history. Now, I don't know if they teach that in the business school or not, because I didn't take many business classes, but, I think education is focused more on teaching you kind of concepts than it is actual practice. Right. I guess the advice I would give is starting my own business was something that I always wanted to do. It was kind of and really the decision to leave came down to a choice. I had to decide whether it was a desire that I could suppress and move forward with practicing, or whether it was something I just needed to try. And ultimately, I realized that if I didn't do it, it was going to be something that I regretted. And so, then I invested my time in trying to understand how the business works, which frankly made me a better business litigator, because now when I talk to clients about payroll issues, or when I talk to clients about employment issues, I'm not just talking about it from an academic legal context, but also from I'm living it from a practical context, right? And when I was with the bigger firm, I guess it's both kind of a luxury and a burden, but all I had to do was practice law, come in and practice law. I didn't have to worry about the the management of the business, the employment issues, the payroll issues. I mean, all the issues that come with running the business, which is something that I wanted to.
I was going to say, because that to me, again, is a good answer because it goes back to your entrepreneurial spirit. Because a lot of people, especially I know with young professionals, primarily physicians, attorneys, don't want that responsibility. They don't want to have to manage payroll. They don't want to have to worry about employees. They want to show up and do their job, if you will. So obviously that was something that was important to you, and it obviously worked out for you.
Right. And if it's something, that's what I would say, is if it's something that you think you might be interested in, don't be afraid to step out and try it. There are some people that's not something they're interested in, to your point.
Right.
They're happy doing the job. They, in my context, and perhaps yours as a professional, they just enjoy the academics of the actual, legal profession, or the academics of the financial business, and actually, the stock picking or the advice or whatever it is. They actually enjoy that maybe much more than the business side of it. I've come to find that while I love the law, I really, really, really have come to love the business side of it, the managing of a business, the marketing, the advertising, the growing, the constantly trying to find ways to improve the business, grow the business, make the business better. Whether that's and at the end of the day, because it's a professional business, it comes back to the services that we provide.
Right.
And what we have found in the 10 years that we've been out on our own is that the best advertising, marketing that we can do is just continuing to do a good job.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it all comes back to still being a lawyer, but I've really, really enjoyed the business side of it and the management side of the business.
Good. Great. So, we've learned about you, learned about your background, very good information. So talk a little bit more specifically about your business. You said you work with a lot of business owners, a lot of, some litigation, some transactions, but I know that y'all have one thing you do with, property taxes that's sort of, in my opinion, unique, or how you handle that. Maybe give us a little background on that.
Yeah, sure. We actually are outside tax counsel for a number of corporations, companies, entities, some of which are Fortune 500 companies, and outside tax, not federal tax, state tax, but ad valorem tax. And what that is basically property taxes. Okay. And it's something that you and I have talked about because it's something obviously that you deal with from a financial standpoint. And, one of the things that I know that you're looking at when you're meeting with your clients is a tax plan, in addition to, growing wealth, but finding a way to, minimize, manage tax liability. And it's interesting because in our experience, what we found is that a lot of individuals and companies that had significant tax strategies in place for things like income taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, things like that, they didn't have any processes in place for property taxes. And it started out, interestingly, with down in southeast Georgia, where we're located, we have a large holding of timberland.
Right.
In the United States, the largest, timberland holdings are in southeast Georgia, basically in northwest Washington.
Okay,
so,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
okay.
So, the land down here, when you get into middle Georgia and further north, the land's a little bit better, and certainly west, the land's better for farming and other things. But down in southeast Georgia, the soil that we have here, the sandy soil is great for growing pine trees. We have a lot of highly concentrated timberland down here, and it began with a lot of timber companies and timber REITs that were looking for some advice with respect to ad valorem tax strategies. Okay. What you'd have would be a sale in a county to a doctor or a lawyer maybe that bought a piece of land for development purposes, right, for recreational purposes, which they would be willing to pay more for that land, and the land was more valuable for those purposes than it was simply for growing timber.
Okay. So
it kind of is something that started out as somewhat of a smaller part of our practice, but has really grown into a significant part of our practice because, for companies or individuals with a significant amount of wealth and property, or a significant amount of ownership in property, then ad valorem taxes, at least in Georgia, can constitute a significant portion of the taxes that you pay every year.
Absolutely.
And while they spend a great deal of time meeting with accountants, financial planners, lawyers, trying to manage their income tax liability. They're doing nothing with respect to their property tax liability. So that was somewhere that we saw an opportunity to help these businesses. And, so that practice has grown to be really a primary part of our practice. And what we found and what I really like about it from a business standpoint is it's quantifiable. We can go in and show, much like you can with other types of taxes, we can go in and show the value of the services that we provide by showing, this is the tax that would have been paid but for, the tax strategy, and this is the tax that you're going to pay now. So it's just another way to manage your tax liability, to ensure that what you're paying from a tax standpoint, an ad valorem tax standpoint, is what you should be paying.
Right.
George is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's nice to have closure to something that you do, because I know a lot of things you do can carry on for multiple years, and with this you kind of have a start and finish to it, which I'm sure is rewarding because you have a direct impact on your clients.
Right, and it's consistent with the business goal. Obviously, at the end of the day, is to keep the lights on, and the way you keep the lights on is by being successful, being profitable. And as a small business owner, in addition to trying to grow the business, you're also trying to manage expenses, right, and keep expenses at a manageable level so that they don't exceed your revenue, so that you maintain profitability.
The biggest detriment to any small business.
Right. And so this is just another example of that, another way in which, a good example may be, everybody knows that they can renegotiate their cable rate by calling the cable company every few months and saying, hey, I'm going to move it over if you don't give me a discount, and they give you a discount. And that, it's a way to manage your cost. It's the same thing. It's a way to manage those costs in order to keep them down, so to ensure that you're paying what is fair, but also, managing those expenses so that you can continue to run a profitable business.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, this has been great information. So I guess to wrap up, give me some parting words of wisdom, or what you would tell, again, young business owners, entrepreneurs, attorneys, lawyers, anything you can think of that you sort of want to leave the audience with.
One of the things I would tell small business owners across the board is to plan for success. That's probably the hardest part of starting a small business, is striking that balance between, you don't want to be arrogant and cocky, in that you're sure that you're going to be successful, right, and get out over your skis, if you will. But at the same time, you also don't want to be, pound foolish. You don't want to spend the money that's necessary to invest in the business so that you can be as successful as you can be. But that's a very difficult balance to strike, and it's one that personally I found hard to strike. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be successful, the only way to be successful is to plan to be successful.
Right.
And if you're not willing to invest the time, the energy, and the money in your business in order to make it successful, then you're handicapping yourself. So that's the biggest thing that I would tell small businesses to do. From a legal standpoint, one of the things that I see with young startup businesses is they want to try to cut corners in order to save money and avoid costs, which is certainly understandable. But sometimes it's done at the expense of the ability to grow, at the expense of the ability to be as successful as they can be. And hiring a good accountant.
Short term.
That's right. We talk. I know you and I talk about this all the time, but hiring a good accountant, hiring a good lawyer, hiring a good financial planner, hiring the right people, hiring people that in-house to manage the schedule and the business, so that you're free to go out and grow the business. Put
a good team in place.
Put a good team in place. That's exactly right. That's one of the best pieces of advice I think I could give, is planning to be successful and preparing to be successful. And I think if you do that, you increase the likelihood you will be successful.
Well, that's an excellent way to put it. And Jason, really appreciate your time today. A lot of good information. And to the audience, want to thank everyone for listening again to our Planning for Life podcast. This certainly helps you do the most important thing that you should be doing, which is planning, and obviously planning now and planning for the future. So again, we appreciate everyone listening today, and we'll see you on the next time.
The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Russell C. Jacobs III, Carl B. Coolidge, James Jacobs, and William Schwartz are registered representatives of and offer securities, investment advisory, and financial planning services through MML Investor Services LLC, member SIPC, Supervisory Office, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, LLC is not a subsidiary or affiliate of MML Investor Services LLC or its affiliated companies.